Well, here's some breaking news that's just coming in. Ricky Ponting has, in fact, announced his retirement from Test cricket. Ponting has announced that tomorrow's Perth Test against South Africa, his 168th, will be the last. Harini Rana joins me on the phone line with the details. Harini, over to you.
Well, absolutely. News coming in at this point of time. Ricky Ponting, now he has been compared time and again with Sachin Tendulkar. However, what we are hearing at this point of time is that he has made a very emotional announcement in Australia just ahead of the Perth Test, which is going to be the third test between Australia and South Africa. And that will be his last international test. Now, what we know is that since last year India visited, Ricky Ponting has been struggling with form. However, he did say that it was a decision that was made by me and not by the selectors to retire. And what we also know that even though he did not have a great series, he had a poor series with low scores in the first two test matches in Brisbane and Adelaide. It was something that Ponting was tentative through the dismissals, and that played on his mind, and because of which he decided to retire. But of course, one of the finest cricketers of Australia, he, however, will continue to play domestic cricket for Tasmania and Hobart Hurricanes in the Big Bash League. But what we are hearing at this point of time is that Ricky Ponting has announced his retirement from international cricket, and this the test in Perth, which begins tomorrow, will be his last that we'll see him. He has been an Australia captain. He's led Australia to many victories, to glorious times. But end of his career, especially after a time when Ricky Ponting was battling against age, he was not getting any younger, his reflexes were slowing down, and he has finally decided to call it quits. We do know in the past, Steve Waugh and other players were asked to leave Australian cricket team. But in fact, let's just go across to Burya Majumdar, who joined us. Burya, the fact that Ricky Ponting was struggling with form under pressure, let's just go to Peter Young. Peter, your first thoughts, the fact that Ricky Ponting has made this announcement, it was something that you guys predicted that it's going to happen very soon?
No, we were taken totally by surprise. We had expected Ricky to play in Perth tomorrow and then to go on to Hobart to break the record for most tests played by an Australian test player. So the decision came as a surprise to our chairman and to our chief executive, but it's pretty typical of Ricky Ponting, the man. His view is that the team should always come first, and he believes that it's the right time now for the team, for him to stand down and allow other players to establish themselves before we play in the Ashes series next year and before we tour India next year.
And it comes at a time when Cricket Australia backed Ricky Ponting while he was struggling with form, be it the tour when India were there, or be it right now when he's had a series of dismal scores. Ricky Ponting coming out and stating that it was my own decision, it wasn't the selectors who told me to quit.
That's right. Ricky made this decision. He's a man in charge of his own mind. He made the decision himself. And as I said earlier, that's typical of how he has carried himself since he made his debut for Australia at the age of 20. He's always had a singular and unswerving view that you should put the team first. And his thinking is that it's the best thing for the team for him to stand down at this time.
And when were you guys made aware that Ricky Ponting is going to make that kind of an announcement, and what was the reaction within the dressing room? It seemed to be, from what we are hearing, quite an emotional time in the dressing room.
Yes, that's right. We found out today. Ricky exchanged messages with our chief executive, James Sutherland. He's just had a meeting with the team itself, and that was a fairly emotional meeting. Our captain has just broken down in tears at the press conference where he's been asked to offer his personal tribute to Ricky. Ricky has always been a very strong mentor of Michael Clarke, and I think Michael is finding it to be as emotional as any of the other players are.
And do we see Ricky Ponting continuing in domestic cricket, maybe playing for the home state of Tasmania or even the Big Bash League team?
Yeah, Ricky does have domestic cricket that he will be playing for the duration of the summer. He will be captain of the Australian Prime Minister's 11 team when it plays against the West Indies in Canberra in the new year. And James Sutherland, the Chief Executive of Cricket Australia, has publicly said in the last 5 or 10 minutes that he would he hopes that Ricky will continue to have an official role in Australian cricket going forward. He's too substantial a person, a player and a leader for us to simply allow him to walk away from cricket, and we don't think that he will.
And also, Perth being his last test match against South Africa, any plans that Cricket Australia has in place to honour Ricky Ponting?
We've started talking about honouring him in Hobart, if that's his wish. He is a fairly private and personal man, and we'll take our lead from him. But he's one of the best ever. After Bradman, he'd be one of the best two or three to have ever played for Australia, and we would like to give him a fitting farewell, but we will take our guidance from him. As I said, he's a fairly personal and private person, and it might be that he just wishes to leave quietly.
Also, could you tell us, Peter, before we let you go, how do you see Ricky Ponting? He was compared to Sachin Tendulkar at times. Did he, in the press conference that he addressed, speak about not getting runs, and that was one of the reasons that he decided that it's time to sort of step aside?
Yeah, his view was that by his own standards, he's not been making enough runs. What he has said to James Sutherland, our chief executive, is that even if he did make runs in Perth, he thinks the time is right to stand down so that new players can come in and can establish themselves as Test cricketers before we tour India next year and before we tour England for the Ashes next year and before we host England back here next year for a back-to-back Ashes series.
Absolutely, and how big a loss will this be, because Ricky Ponting will not be part of the important Ashes series?
Well, a player of this stature is very, very difficult to replace, but Australian cricket and world cricket has had significant champions retire before, and the game is always proven to be bigger than any of the individual players. But the game will roll on. Australian cricket will roll on. He will be greatly missed, but we still believe that we are on track to regain our mantle as number one Test side in the world.
Thank you very much, Peter Young, for speaking to Times Now. In fact, we're also joined by Boria Majumdar. Boria, your first thoughts on the fact that waking up to the news that Ricky Ponting has called it quits? Boria, if we can come back to you, your first thoughts on Ricky Ponting. In fact, that's the big news coming in at this point of time, that Ricky Ponting has announced his retirement in Perth. The Perth Test match, which is going to be the third Test match between Australia and South Africa, will be his last Test match. Former Australian captain, played over 160 Test matches and has had a phenomenal record as a player. However, finally, the fact that he has not been scoring runs has forced him to call it quits and retire international cricket.
Right, Harini, thanks very much for joining us on that big cricketing story coming in, Ricky Ponting announcing his retirement. We slip into a short break. Right now, on the other side, we get your political news. Now, months after Ajit Pawar resigned as the Deputy Chief